You know, do we want to do this? Do we want to do that? Again, the flavors of that depend on the individual and the technique. Some people, want to attach a little machine to the brain and monitor when they're producing beta waves and start, that helps them establish certain good patterns of behavior and meditative states. Some people want to take synthetic chemicals. Some people want to use sacred plants. Some people want to go out into sit by a beautiful lake, at dawn and meditate. All these things are worth looking into. All these things are relevant. None of them are wrong. They just might not fit certain individuals as well as they do others. So the paths and the tools and the techniques and the teachers of these techniques, fundamentally the teachers, just as in any walk of life, sometimes we need teachers, all of us. They are all out there. And while we still have internet, before it changes to something else, which is even more interesting, after a brief period of darkness, I prophesize. But after that, it will be easy. But prior to that, while it's just pixels on a screen, one good thing about that is that no one really has any excuse of how to do this and where to go and what to do, because that library is now on your computer and you can get to nearly any information. Even some that wasn't really in the mainstream just 20 years ago is now there. And it's not everything isn't there, of course, it's only what's publicly available. But even that is a lifetime study to go into these systems and to look at what the Hindus were doing, to look at what the Druids were doing, to look at what Zoroastrian thought, how does that connect to what we're doing today? How does Egyptian mythology affect modern politics in America? What's the connection? Is it important? It's very, very, very important, and most people have no idea about it. So there are many areas of study that we can go into, and we have to balance personal experiential study with disciplined, scholarly, philosophical study, because one without the other is no use. You need to become your own scholar and your own explorer at the same time, because you need both those skills really. And we develop them in our own ways. It doesn't mean we have to write books and do academic things. Being a scholar is simply having discipline and doing things in an organized way. Being an explorer is about putting yourself on the edge, is about pioneering, is about taking risks, is about falling over and then getting back up again. And if you can combine those two things, then your discovery and your growth is an awful lot faster and deeper. And it's a simple thing, but it bears repeating that combination of skills.
Right. So there's so much material out there, and I see discernment as an essential tool we all need in our bag. Have you worked out any process or methods that you use personally that others can benefit from for processing this information?
There are lots of ways of doing it. A few things. Let's talk about some practical things. One thing to do, which is very important, is to get regular contact with nature. And as I sometimes say, go to a place where there are no right angles. Go to a place where there's no plastic and no metal and no glass and no screens, and make that as pristine an environment as you can get where you are. So if that's a park and that's the best you can do, okay. If you can get in the car and go 2 hours to a forest, brilliant. If you have just got a little tiny backyard with some green in it and you can get a little bit of peace and quiet there, that's fine. That's fine. Do the best you can. Having contact with nature is very important, because on a metaphysical level, it allows certain processes to happen in the body and in the mind that can't happen when you're in a space which is synthetic, which is designed according to man's ideas. Nature moves at its very core in a very organic, curved way, and it works absolutely naturally, absolutely effortlessly, encoded with this sacred geometry, with these shapes of how the universe is built. And very notable that those shapes are curves essentially, and there's nothing really that's like a linear point. Everything is curved, and nothing really truly ends and begins. It all flows into each other. You know, the roots of the tree flow into the soil, the mushroom mycelium flow into the soil. You know, the clouds, the water, the ice, they're all really the same thing, just flowing in circles in a different form. Being in that environment physically, intellectually, and emotionally changes what is going on in your body and what is going on in your mind. And you might not feel it because you've not tuned yourself into it very well, or because you're not accustomed to it. But the more time you spend in it, the more one begins to appreciate that it's not just going, oh, look at the view, isn't that nice? And fresh air, it's good for us, isn't it? And oh, there's a bear. That's all very nice, but it's much more fundamental than that. It actually helps us ascend. It helps the energies move in the body. So that's very important. Another good thing to build into one's life is to make sure that you create enough time for the things that you need to do. So one of the worst offenders is the man or the woman who says, I'm so busy, I haven't got time to do the things I'd really like to do. Okay? That's not acceptable unless you're married with 20 kids and you're running 3 companies. That's your choice that you put yourself in that situation. Okay, whatever. But if you're on a spiritual path, there are always things you can do to make time. And that goes in accordance with your decisions about how you choose to live your life, what you need, what you don't need, what resources you need, how far into the future do you need to plan, what makes you feel secure. All those things, it asks big questions about yourself when you start looking at making time, because we're taught that unless you're doing productive work, you're wasting time. So creating time is all about making space for contemplation. So you don't have to fill it with playing your guitar and painting pictures and, skateboarding, through the city or whatever it is you do. You can do cool stuff like that, whatever, but just contemplate, to be able to sit down, not with your laptop, not with a book, not with your iPod or whatever, but just to sit down and just sit there with, a cup of tea and just contemplate, think about things, think about what you're doing, what are you doing with your life, where are you? Sometimes in a very subtle way, in a very gentle way, just wistful little thoughts that just drift by like little clouds. At other times, like big stuff, really go deep and really think about it. And again, in a natural environment, that assists that process, because on some days it goes deep and on some days it does not go deep, and that's all right. So high vibrations and low vibrations are both relevant, are both important. But if you don't make the time in your life and you don't have any space to contemplate, then everything that you do kind of falls through the sieve. It just disappears. It falls like sand through your fingers. You can't hold it because you haven't got any contemplative power. You haven't made the space and the time for your own path. And frankly, what's more important than that? Not much, really. Not much. Once we've dealt with our obligations to our friends and family and loved ones and make sure everyone's happy and everything's cool, all the rest of that time is yours. And we have to choose very, very carefully what we do with that. So sometimes if I'm asked this question, what can we do? You think, well, you need to stand on one leg and wear a red t-shirt and put this magic pill under your tongue and jump up and down. And people want very quick fix techniques. But fundamentally, if you make space to go into nature and make time for your own contemplation of the world and your place in it, the techniques will begin to present themselves. They will begin to present themselves. And again, those are different for every different person. But we have talked about some of the techniques. Stilling the mind is very important. Meditation is a luxury for a lot of people. Everybody says the same things. I don't do it as much as I'd like to do, or I used to do it a lot, but I don't anymore. I must get back to it. Meditation, you don't have to go and sit on a cushion in a special place somewhere